Happy Monday, friends. Thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and I hope you've enjoyed meditating on Isaiah 64, 1 through 4. This passage, again, like last week, is very, very close, very near and dear to my heart. And if you've been meditating on Isaiah 64, 1 through 4 with me, then you know it's all about waiting. And waiting might be something that you know a little bit about, and I do too. Some of you know that I got married last year at 46 for the first time. So I like to think I'm a little bit experienced in the waiting realm. But I believe very firmly in waiting for God's best. And when I was praying about what to share this week, the Lord just kept reminding me that all of us at some point are in a season of waiting. And maybe you find yourself there today. Maybe you're waiting for God to do something in your life. Maybe it feels impossible. Maybe you feel like you've been waiting for so long. Maybe you heard him wrong, or you're just making stuff up in your head and you shouldn't be waiting for it at all. I don't know where you're at today, but I do pray that this passage encouraged you. This is one of my go-to passages, again, when I meet with clients. So much heartbreak, so many things in this world that we don't understand. So many questions that I get asked along the lines of, Kerri, why is God allowing this? Or why is God not intervening? And I don't have the answer to why God chooses everything that he chooses and why he does what he does. And I don't know why he needed me to be single until I was 46. And many of you know my oldest sister, Kim, is late stage ALS. She's very, very ill. And I don't know why God needs her to be in that season. But I do know that just like I waited 46 years for God to bring me his perfect best for me and a husband, my sister Kim, who has ALS, is waiting on the Lord as well, waiting for him to show up for her, waiting for him to put breath in her lungs every day, waiting for him to fulfill the promises in her life, waiting on him to care for her husband and her children emotionally in this very difficult time. So I want to read this passage, and some of you didn't have a chance to meditate on it all week. That's okay. I want you to join in with us anyway. But if you did meditate on this passage and pray over it this week, would you please leave some comments? Would you share with me how this passage impacted your life, how it touched you, what it meant to you, and how you plan on applying it moving forward? Let me read Isaiah 64, 1 through 4. Oh, that you would burst from the heavens and come down, how the mountains would quake in your presence. As fire causes wood to burn and water to boil, your coming would make the nations tremble. Then your enemies would learn the reason for your fame. When you came down long ago, you did awesome deeds beyond our highest expectations, and oh, how the mountains quaked. For since the world began, no ear has heard, and no eye has seen a God like you who works for those who wait for him. Waiting is something that makes our flesh scream. We don't like it. It makes us feel out of control. It makes us doubt ourselves. Often in a season of waiting, we doubt that we're doing the right thing, or we heard the right thing, or we're on the right path. Waiting is on every level uncomfortable for us as humans. And for us to grow and to learn in this place of waiting really requires a lot of faith. It really requires that God is actually who he says he is. Well, before that he exists. Then that he's who he says he is. And then maybe the most difficult for a lot of us is God loves me enough to actually bring about the thing I'm waiting on him for. I think that's where it gets very real for us, is I'm waiting on this thing, but I'm not sure I'm lovable enough that God's actually going to show up for me. For instance, there were certainly times when I was single that I doubted that God was going to bring me his perfect best. I wasn't going to settle. I didn't want to marry just any old guy. I had in my spirit a standard of what I believed God's best for me was, through a lot of prayer and a lot of lists. And I waited for God's best for 46 years. But certainly in that 46 years, I doubted myself. I doubted my lovability. I doubted God's love for me. And so I had to go back to this passage multiple times. And I still do, because I'm always waiting for God to do something, to show up in some way. And what this passage is saying is, God, we saw you move in the past. This passage is referring to Judges chapter 5, when God shook Mount Sinai. And his people were just blown away at his power and his authority. And so they're reminiscing, they're remembering, they're looking back to what God did in the past. And they said, you know what? You did it before, and now we need you to do it again. And the prophet Isaiah is saying, God, when you move, it's unlike anything we've ever seen or heard before. Nothing our eyes have seen, nothing our ears have heard. And we need you to move in a way that blows our mind because we're struggling here. We're having a difficult time here. And we need you not just to show off for us, but to show off to our enemies how powerful you are. And I love this passage because what this passage does is it gives us a perfect example of how we can be successful in our waiting. The best advice that I give somebody that's in a difficult season of waiting is wait with remembrance. Remember what God has done for you in the past. Remember what he did for you last week and last month and last year. And remember how he showed up for your family. He showed up at your job. He showed up in all the different areas of your life in the past. Remember his faithfulness. To me, that's the premise of the entire Old Testament. Remember what God did. Remember his faithfulness. Remember that he's for you. Remember he's the God who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Exodus 14:14. So in this passage, I see God's people reminding God of his own power, saying, we'd like to see that again, please. But we're remembering who you are. We're remembering what you're capable of. And it's in that remembering, we're going to stand here at the base of the mountain and we're going to wait until you move again. And so my encouragement for you is that you would wait at the base of the mountain of whatever that mountain is in your life, whatever feels big, impossible, hard, difficult, and say, God, I'm going to wait here for you to show up and do your thing. I'm not going to take it into my own hands. I'm not going to take back the control of my life. I surrendered it to you. But the way that I'm going to stand firm and I'm going to wait patiently on you is by remembering your faithfulness to me in the past. So I hope that blessed you. I hope that encouraged you today. And I hope that I get to hear from you in the comments. Please let me know how this passage impacted your life. So for next week, let's meditate on John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18, which is the story of Mary Magdalene. So John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. I'll see you next week.